Hello, my name's Jon Smith and this is The Agency. Tonight we have two fascinating guests for you. As you know, the last two programmes we've looked in the football agency world and some of the issues that have been relevant at the time and tried to show you some of the issues that are behind the stories of that day. Tonight I have Tony Finnigan and Peter Storrie. Tony, ex-player, now one of the leading agents in the world of football, representing players such as Nigel Reo-Coker, and was the man behind that remarkable move of Troy Hewitt from non-league Harrow Borough straight to Queen's Park Rangers. Now, Peter Storrie and I have known each other for many, many years, actually when the earth was cooling down. He's been one of the most senior operators and administrators in the football world, at the top of clubs like Southend United, Notts County, was the first ever managing director in 1991 at West Ham, and more recently was chief executive of Portsmouth. He has a lot to say, and I think you'll find both of my guests tonight are enormously entertaining. Gentlemen, you're very welcome.
Good evening.
Now, before we go into all the issues that are around, the last programme that I hosted here was all about the football trading window, which actually was reasonably quiet, wasn't it, Tony?
Yeah, very quiet. I think everyone, it's the build-up and all the suspense leading up to it. Everyone thinks who's going to go down. And the countdown that you get on Sky as well makes it all, try and make it as exciting as possible. And I think it's kind of, I think it adds to the suspense as well. You know, the way Sky had the days and they counting down, you know, 300 or 25 days to go or 50 days to go to the window closes. And
how do you feel the buying and selling market is going to be in the next 12, 24 months? I mean, the financial cut that's hit all of us, the financial bite, has actually, as you can see from the chart on the screen, in 07, 08 we were trading, these are January figures,
yeah.
windows, and even at 09, 10 the recession began to really bite, 11 was a bit of a blip because largely that was Manchester City doing what they did, and of course we're down at 65 million in the January window, of which Cahill was a sizable proportion, and as was Cisse, so the rest made up numbers. Yeah. Do you see this as a trend? Are the football clubs going to hold their bank accounts very tightly?
Yeah, I believe they will. I think that it's refreshing, if I'm being really, really honest. I think the January window can inflate the price, and does, not think it does, especially for British talent. I think if you're a buying club, you're trying to tease, let's say for example, one of the players I represent, Victor Moses, had a couple of conversations with Premiership clubs regarding taking his services, and one asked, would they accept £1 million? I was like, well, if Wigham's remained in the Premier League, it's worth a lot more than them losing or gaining £1 million for one of their talented youngsters. So, you know, from that perspective, I just think it gives people with money the clout they think to suddenly ring someone up and take the mickey out of them and try and get their best assets, because basically that's what you're doing, that last little bit that you need to try and get promotion or whatever.
But those people with a lot of money have got to realise they're in a league, and without the other clubs there is no competition and there is no money. Yeah. Look, I want to come back and talk about loans and the configuration of how some of these deals are made so that the viewers can begin to see what is a football deal. Yeah. Although we've talked about it in the last couple of programmes, I know you've got a few views. Yeah. Peter, the management of a football club is under a lot of scrutiny, and we're going to talk about that a lot in the coming hour or so. How do you see the finances across the board at the moment, in the English Premier League in particular, certainly in the spending power of the few against the balancing out of the finances for the rest?
I think over the last few years it's got much, much tighter, and you can see back on your chart, you know, that if you look at 2008, 2009 and 2011, where there was large lumps of expenditure, it started by several clubs spending big, and then that forced those clubs then to buy other players, and it went around in that sort of market spiral. When you don't get one or two big buys in the window, then the money, as you can see from your chart, drops down. It just doesn't happen. And you know,
the European leagues don't feed that. I know the Italians are in a bit of a financial state.
Yeah, they
themselves.
are. I mean, if you look at Italians, there's a lot of loans that go on now within the Italian market now. You don't see so many transfers, and even in Spain now, I think it's reduced down. So I think if you take those three markets out, you know, the Spanish one, the Italian and the UK, there's very little actual transfer movement going on around. Some in Brazil, some, you know, but not a great deal. But you just don't see it anymore.
Interesting. I want to ask you something. A lot of the people that we've talked to who who watch this programme say, who makes the decisions? What happens when, apart from the obvious, Chelsea need a centre-back, everyone thought, yeah, there's probably going to be Cohen in the mix. You've sat down with your board, your manager, you were director of football, you're your chief executive. Can you tell people how this system worked from your experience? Do people, is it a collective, or is there one guy, the manager says, I want, and that's what I want, and that's what I want? How do you manage that?
It depends, obviously, club to club, but I've always worked in clubs where an owner has actually owned the club 100%. So he obviously has the ultimate decision. A manager initially would look at improving his squad, or even, you know, saying he wanted to move a couple of players on. It would generally be the chief executive's job to negotiate those deals, both in and out.
So the manager will point,
the manager
and then
will
he'll
point,
say, Peter,
he will choose.
I need you to make the call.
And he will go there, but the
club?
ultimate decision will always be with the owner of the club, because it's his money and his finance. So he will have the ultimate say. He you know, may talk to board members. He'll certainly talk to the chief executive. And, you know, in my enjoyable time I had through many years with Milan Mandrick, you know, we worked very, very closely together, as I did with Sasha Gaidamak. But the ultimate decision will always be with the owner.
So the owner, in association with the chief executive, obviously with the sign-off of the manager,
in
makes
the clubs
a
I've
decision.
worked for, and the clubs that have been owned 100% by one person.
Why, and this is a question I get asked quite a lot, why do agents, and how do agents, Tony, get involved in that process? So let's say Peter's club has made a decision. Why isn't there a club-to-club call? Why very often is the agent sitting in the middle of it, even when it's a two British club or a two English club transaction?
To be honest, I think there's a number of issues for that, John. I think the way I've worked, and it's managed to be for the last 10, 12 years, is I expect, and that's, you know, as an ex-player, I would want the club interested and my club to get together, make the phone call, agree together, and then when they inform the player, look lad, we've had an offer from a club for you. You are now duty bound to go and speak to your agent, and then he can make those calls.
Okay. Walking down that road with you a little bit, your player maybe isn't getting the attention he wants during the season. He doesn't feel he's playing enough, or he's only been brought on for the last 15, 20. You know how difficult that is to make an impact on a game in the last 15 minutes. Would you take the ball by the horns and go to someone like Peter and say, look, or the manager, what process does the agent hold in making the player's case, either for more game time or for an exit?
Yeah, and again, I would always say, and this is the interesting part. If a player, it's a squad game. The new Premier League, the new football today, it's a squad game. So the person that comes on and makes an impact, he's there for a reason. If he was seen in the manager's eyes to be able to dictate a game for 60, 70, 80 minutes, he'd be starting. And I defy any footballer to look me in the eye and say, look, don't be moaning at your agent because you're sub. You're playing. And if you're not able to be chosen in the first 11, for whatever reason the manager sees, then that's how it works. And if you're managed to be in the squad that travels from Portsmouth to Chelsea or whatever, and you're involved, well, then it's up to you to make an impact for 15 minutes. Because I actually disagree with that, John, that for 15 minutes, you can make yourself a name. Because if you've done something that wins your side...
If the game plays to you, and if your right side of the game's all on the left side of the field.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but you've got to look at it from the manager's point of view. If he's just brought you on for 15 minutes to do a specific job, you've said 15 minutes, not 2 or 3. He's got a job to actually do for his team. I would buy that. So from that point of view, back to your actual point, I would never be pushing the manager and say, look, why is he not playing? I would always say to the player, go and ask the question. I don't get involved in that. Okay. Again, because I played.
I think that's an interesting answer.
I wouldn't want anyone to do that for me. Okay. I am playing.
I think that's the answer everyone wants to hear, and I'm pleased to hear that. Talking about managers, we've talked about boards and players. A manager in the spotlight at the moment, Peter, Mr. Capello.
Yep.
How did you see that exit? It did seem like it could have been engineered by him to create the exit that he was looking for. But then, and we might have a clip coming up in a minute, I just want you to hear a little bit of this that came out of Italy on the night, and then it's an Italian journalist. I just want you to tell me what you think once you've heard this.
Fabio Capello started this issue about him leaving the England job by giving an interview to an Italian TV station, Rai, rather than talking maybe to the BBC in England.
Well, I'll tell you this. You probably, I don't know if you know this, but you're probably talking with a man that in some way is a bit probably responsible of what has happened, because when Sunday night when Sunday night he gave this interview, this short interview, because it's this kind of a very short program, 5 minutes on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And he gave this short interview talking about completely different matters. He talked about the season, the winter, the Italian stadiums, the fight in Serie A between Juventus and Milan.
Yeah.
There was just 40 seconds in this interview, 40 seconds where he mentioned actually this matter. He didn't talk about it, he mentioned this matter.
Yeah.
And I was there, and I said, okay, I think now revolution is gonna break out.
Right.
I waited there for some minutes because I know that English media are so ready. Nothing was happening. I said, okay, guys, this can't be really. And when I started to tweet about what he said,
Yeah.
I was then contacted by all the English medias,
Yeah.
all the English papers, other TVs that were asking me confirmation about his sentences.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I said, okay, this something, really something here is going to happen from this reaction, I can say.
Golly.
And I can tell you from maybe, let's say, from kind of body language,
Yeah.
from his way to answer to that question, that he was for sure not expecting that this kind of consequence would happen already on Tuesday night.
Okay.
I'm sure about that.
Peter, my question to you, and I want to talk to you about did the FA show management skills beyond that. Your reaction to that, it looks like it may have just been, it was a comment.
It was a strange, because I was actually in France at the time when it happened, and so I read about it and heard it on the French side first, and they were sort of saying on their TVs, isn't this surprising that it's not come out through an English media interview rather than Italian, and I think that came over, I think, quite surprising all the way around, and I'm surprised that he did it.
Was it news over there, by the way, in France?
Yeah, it was news. Yeah, it's very
Tony,
much news.
Your thoughts about the way that kind of snuck out, rather than it didn't seem to be engineered, or maybe it was? He seemed to be saying, but very shortly, you know, this is not a place I want to be if I can't name my own captain. But he didn't kind of make the point as big as the media seemed to have had, as the media seemed to have publicised it the following day. Do you think he was looking for the exit?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. And I mean, you're talking about the manager of our national side. You know, one of the biggest management jobs in the world. You know, we are a massive, massive name in the draw. We've got great stadia. I don't have to promote our country to anybody, but this is a man, as far as I'm concerned, didn't show his employers enough respect.
Do you think his employers did the right thing? In terms of they removed the captaincy from one of his players without discussing it first?
That was wrong, definitely.
Do you agree with that, Peter?
Yeah, I think there should have been a little bit more thought about how that was done. Did the employers did the right thing in terms of bringing this contract to the end once it happened? Yes, of course. I think there was no way.
That was a given. That had to happen.
There was no way that it was going to go forward.
So they showed some sort of leadership in
Yeah,
that,
I think so. But I think the problem is when you're England manager and you're doing things with the England thing, everything you do is heavily in the spotlight. And I think with the whole scenario, you know, how it was handled from the beginning with the John Terry situation right through to the end of him, in hindsight could have been done a lot better and a lot easier. But sometimes, you know, and I've been in those situations in club management, sometimes events happen and the media or information leak runs away with you, and therefore the things that you really thought you should do, and you think, oh, I wish I'd done that.
It just seems that the FA are continually one step behind that. It just runs on and on and on, and
then it was very difficult.
Let me move it on a little bit, because I know one of your best mates in football is one H. Redknapp.
Yep.
Thoughts about him for the England, that question mark, maybe if England role?
Harry and I worked with each other for 16 years. You know, he's a fantastic guy. Now, in my opinion, he's without doubt the outstanding candidate to take the England job. He has to think of various things, you know, if he's going to do this. I mean, Harry loves the day-to-day involvement.
Is he the right man for the job in your view?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, let's go to Paul Smith. Hello, Paul Smith. You're no relative of mine, I don't think, but hello, just in case you are. I'll be very nice to you. You're very welcome. Hello.
Hi there.
Paul, tell us what you think about your manager. I know you're a Spurs fan. Your manager and his potential conflict of management responsibility in the coming weeks and months.
Well, I think he's made very clear that his focus is on Tottenham, certainly for the rest of the season, and he'll want to do that, whatever the future, for his career CV, if you like. I mean, at this moment in time, Spurs are still, they are still in the hunt for the title. I know that Man City and United are favourites more than we are, but we are still in that race. We're still very much involved in the FA Cup, and it's only right that that's where his focus should be at the moment. But we do understand that he's obviously the world's favourite.
How would you feel if he left you?
Well, I think
it's your nation as well.
I personally sort of live in the real world, and I realise that we're not talking about a relationship where, if you think about Modric last season, Daniel Levy put his foot down and said, you know, you're not going anywhere. We're talking about a different relationship, I think, between chairman and manager here, and there's no way, I don't think, that Daniel Levy would prevent Harry from going if that was the decision that Harry made. So I think at the end of the day, the man himself is going to make that decision, and I can't read his mind any better than any of you can.
Well, we're getting very close to a commercial break, so I'm just going to ask you one more question, if I may. League position for Tottenham, with or without Harry in May? I think, my view, by the way, is I think he'll still be there in May. But your view of where you're going to be? First,
sorry, is
second?
it to me?
Yes, sorry, Paul, to you.
Yeah,
where do you think your team's going to be at the end of the season?
I personally think that we'll stay in third.
Okay, that's got to be a result, guys, isn't it?
Yeah,
playing great football.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you very much for your involvement. It's great having people like you around the show, and please feel free to come back to us at any time in the future. I wish you lots of luck, and go fly the flag for us in Europe next year.
Thanks a lot.
So guys, Harry potentially for England. Any other thoughts of who might be potentially pivotal in that role?
I think it's hard to think of anyone above Harry, to be honest. And that's no disrespect. There's obviously some very, very good managers in the country, but I just think he will bring what everybody needs,
okay,
you know, to the game.
We're going to go to a commercial break. We have a choice of one. I can't say very many people are going to disagree with you. Don't go away, everybody. Anybody. Lots more to discuss. See you after this. Hello and welcome back to the agency. Two stars of the football world, Tony Finnigan, Peter Storrie are with me. We're discussing the issues of the day. We've discussed the football trading window. We've discussed the England managerial situation. I guess top of the pile in most football supporters' minds these days are the finances of their football club. And Peter, you were chief executive of Portsmouth at a time when it went through some very difficult trading times, and your ownership was positioning itself in perhaps a way that nobody really knew what was the correct way that they were positioning themselves. This sounds a bit convoluted, but in other words, they were saying things that perhaps weren't altogether true. Yeah. You were really in the hot seat. Can I ask you your thoughts of that time and how Portsmouth came to go into administration the first time? The second time I know we can't really talk too much about, we'll just touch on later, but the first time in 2010. How did that come about? Well,
it's without sort of boring you with a long story about it. In simple terms, we had a very, very good owner in Alexander Gaidamak that put a lot of his own money into the club. And I mean, basically, with 20,000 people coming through the gates, you know, the club couldn't sustain the payroll that it was having in terms of the quality of players without an owner. As does in many other clubs, you know, putting in income, and Alexander did that in a lot of ways and a lot of his personal money. Unfortunately, you know, there came to a point where the credit crunch hit, and he was hit financially very, very heavy, and he had to stop that. So to continue to go forward, we had to sell players, and we were doing that, you know, quite successfully and keeping the business going. But then Sasha decided that it was his right to do so, to sell the club, and everybody thought he'd sold it to a multi-millionaire individual, and the
man who he sold it to didn't have the substance.
And Suleiman, who to be fair to Suleiman, he loved the club and he wanted to really be involved and do it, but. How do you
now you're in the hot seat.
But how do you control that?
How do you
know
know
that someone has got
that
money? That's the question about it. I mean, I got a lot, obviously, criticism at Portsmouth because of the situation, but that was the wishes at the time of the owners to run the business in the way and bring in the quality of players, and that yes, the club was losing money, but the owner was covering it, and the owner was covering it every single year and putting the money in.
Was there a time when you would wake up in the morning and think, I can't believe what's going on around me, I'm going to have to drive this myself? And did you have the ability, not the ability, I know you had the ability, did you have the power to do that?
At the time, obviously, when we're talking about back into August 2009, when Sasha sold the club, yes, I was, for some time, I'd been trying to get new owners into the business. I travelled around the world to try and get people in.
And you very nearly did.
And we did. I mean, Sullivan was one of them. Obviously, there was other people as well. And all these people, convince you that they've got millions and millions of pounds, and they go through this fit and proper person test that they that there is. The question now, looking back on the whole thing, and looking for the future of football, unless you set up in the future some form of escrow account where money is put into an account, and therefore everybody, the Football League and the Premier League, then know that for whatever amount of years, when they get a new owner in, there is money sitting there.
So there would be an escrow account of 15, 20 million.
So I thought about it a lot, thinking. I just keep thinking, John. How do you know that someone's got money? How do you
administer that? Do you put that with the Football Association? With the Football Association, and that money stays until such time as you go.
I can't think of any other method or any other way of saying that if a club sets a budget, and that budget, shows that they're going to lose, say, 5 million a year because of the, the income of that. Hopefully, everyone gets to the point where you don't lose any money. But let's say hypothetically it said
times covered, 2 or 3 times covered.
Then you need that covered 2 or 3 times in an escrow account before that person is allowed to take over the club. I've thought of lots and lots of different methods and ideas since it happened. I just wonder if that's been thought of.
It's a very good idea. I hope it's picked up. Now we have a gentleman called Ben on the phone. He's not on the Skype vision. So, Ben, hello. You're very welcome.
Hiya.
Now, I know you've got a question for Peter or for Tony or both, so please fire away.
Yeah, as a Portsmouth fan, obviously I just got a couple of questions there for Peter. First of all, I just wanted to know, how. I know Peter said there that obviously the owner was spending, and we were buying these big players and players on big wages, but it doesn't really take a financial expert to work out we were spending a lot more than we had, and if Sasha did back out like he did, we were going to be left up the creek really. So why were these kind of players brought in on these big contracts with that in mind?
But because at the time there was no indication that Sasha Gainamak wasn't going to fund the club for the foreseeable future. That was his aim and his ambition from the moment he came into the club, that he wanted to make it a big and a powerful club, and he was 100% behind financing it. It's no real different to how it's happened with Chelsea. To a degree, obviously, with Manchester United, with the Glazers and other clubs, Aston Villa, they all have these 100% owners that are happy to support the club 100 degrees.
It did seem, Ben, that it was just a bit unfortunate. The Portsmouth situation happened once, as Peter's described, and sadly has happened again. I had a brief conversation this morning with the administrator, Trevor Birch, and it is exceedingly tight there. How do you feel as a fan? I know you've given what you've given, and your group of supporters have given so much to the club. I know you feel sad. What's the overriding emotion apart from sadness? Is there anger, or is there hope? Is there fear? What do you think? What do you feel about your club at the moment?
Obviously, it's mixed emotions. There was a fan forum last night held with the new administrator, Trevor Birch, and he basically said we've got enough cash to last us until April, and if we don't pretty much sell out every game between now and the end of the season, that could be it for us by the end of April. Obviously, we're looking to offload players, which, you know, it's even sadder because we've got a good group of players. We've got a good bunch of lads who are passionate, and a lot of them have taken a pay cut and, you know, disregarded January's wages, so that, you know, they haven't been paid at all for January, and they've said just scrap it. So they're playing for free basically, and then they're going to be paid at the end of the season. So, you know, it's great to have that kind of support from our players, but also we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with regards to ownership.
So it's a kind of fingers crossed situation for you, really.
Exactly, yeah.
It's an interesting
definitely.
appointment, Peter. You were saying to me before the programme began that HMRC have appointed, their appointment of this candidate is quite interesting.
The thing that interests me about it is if HMRC have appointed through the court, you know, Trevor obviously works for PKM, and the Inland Revenue traditionally in every sort of CVA, and the club will have to come out through a CVA for it to retain its, you know, its level as it is at the moment. How does that then work? Because the revenue have never ever voted in favour of a CVA. They've always voted
Given
against.
that its logical conclusion, Portsmouth Football Club may not exist.
Yeah, and
beyond
all I
April,
want,
May.
as Ben said, for me, I love the club. I love working there. I love the club. I love the fans. I love the supporters there. It was the most enjoyable time I ever had in my life. And I just, it's a question I think needs answering, is are the revenue going to support the club coming out of a CVA? Because if they don't, then that's an interesting thing that has to be looked at.
Take that position back with you, Ben. And thank you so much again for your involvement. We wish you only good luck and good fortune, and many more years in the Football League, and hopefully one day again in the Premier League. Tony, sad. Eh?
Yeah, very sad. Yeah, for everyone concerned.
Got any players at Portsmouth?
I have actually. I've got 2 young pros there.
Have you advised them? Have you said anything to them?
Well, to be honest, the first time I've touched on this, and it's ironic really, is today. I spoke to Jed Wallace, is the young lad, his father, and I've just said, look, he came via the non-league route. I just said, it's your son's dream to have become a professional. He still is, and this happens in football. You know, he's young enough, and he's young enough to actually continue and carry on, and hopefully see the other side of it and learn from it, because, you know.
So you have to, Tony, you have to now look at those lads and say they may be out of contract in a minute.
Yeah.
So you're already presumably in that market.
Yeah, I mean, I have to do that.
Of
you
course,
know.
no, I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't. That's your responsibility.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that for the viewers that are watching, the football fans that are watching, it's interesting to see how the process works.
Yeah.
But we've got another situation in the north at the moment, north of the border at Rangers. Yeah. I mean, I know, Peter, you and I are good mates with David Murray. He ran a most enormously successful football club up there. I think probably outside of Real Madrid, the most successful football club in the history of European football. Got caught out maybe a little bit with this employment benefit trust. We're waiting for the revenue waiting for the judgment on that. Again, do you have any players up at Rangers?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Do you do much up in
No,
Scotland?
I don't, to be honest.
It's a different place, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but you know, it's sad that it's actually institutionalised up there. I mean, it's part of the Scottish. It's nearly as institutionalised as the haggis.
Yeah. No, I've played up there. I've never done this side of football. I mean, I remember playing up at Falkirk and playing against Rangers. It was
What's the passion like up there?
Unbelievable.
It is great, isn't it?
That day, I will never, for the rest of my life, I'll never forget what that was. That unbelievable crowd, and you know the divide as well between. I think at the time I was shared. Mo Johnson was there, so he'd played for Celtic and Rangers, and you know the stories he would tell you.
That old. Right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
We've got a Scot called Scott. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Thank you.
Are you well?
I'm good, yeah, thanks.
Oh, I can see you now. Now, you're a Rangers man, are you?
Yes.
I want to ask you, and I'm biased in this question, because I've worked with David Murray for many years, and I think he's a remarkable individual, both as a human being, with the disabilities he's had to overcome, and the fact as a genuine human being and football fan, for me, he's an A1 bloke. How do the Rangers supporters feel towards David? I know how you feel towards Craig White at the moment. How do you feel towards David?
Personally, it's hard because David Murray chased a dream, and at the time, every fan went along with it. So, in hindsight, I think everybody's now looking back and thinking we overspent here and there. The EBTs, maybe they should have looked at that a bit more seriously before going along with that, although it's obvious that we have to wait for a judgment on that as well. But, you know, it's hard because without David Murray, we wouldn't have had 9 in a row. We wouldn't have been, as you know, had the Champions League success we had back in 92, 93. So it's...
And he did give you financial stability for quite some time with the most magnificent training facilities.
Yeah, a lot of people go on about, you know, the finances and, you know, he overspent and things like that. But Rangers were only roughly around 18 million in debt when David Murray actually sold the club on. That's in football. That's not really, you know,
it's not that much debt by football terms. You're absolutely right. And he sold it for a pound, and Craig knew what he was getting. I just, you know, I hope people will see that David's legacy is positive towards the club. How do you see Scottish football now? Is this going to make this a one-horse race?
For the time being, this season's a write-off, so it's a one-horse race this season, and it just depends when and if Rangers come out of administration and what state they're in, what they can do for the next couple of years. You know, it might be a case of tightening their belts even further. I think, you know, as long as it comes back to being Rangers, then I don't think the fans mind, you know, too much. So it's obviously dependent on the big tax case.
Okay, we've got a minute before the break. Peter, any last words about Rangers?
It's such a shame to see it. Do you know what's fascinating about it? I looked at the league table, and it just shows you the power of these two clubs, Rangers and Celtic. Rangers get 10 points deduction, and they're still 6 points clear of the team in third place, which is quite amazing to actually see, and it shows the power of the two clubs. But Scottish football, and I think European football, need Glasgow Rangers, and they need Glasgow Celtic. They're two giants.
But let me ask you, Tony, very snappy answer because we've got to go to a commercial break. Should the two Glasgow clubs be allowed into the English Football League, riding north towards the Premier League? It's a yes, no, I guess, this one, because that will open up Scottish football for the other clubs.
No.
Absolutely not?
No.
Okay. Thank you for that. We'll pick that up another day, I'm sure. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't go away. Scott, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Wish you lots of luck. It's one of my favourite clubs, I have to say. We'll be back in a very short while. And welcome back to the agency. Now, so many things swirling around the world of football. Let's talk managerial. Let's talk about hiring and firing a manager. And I guess we've got a perfectly made situation for a brief discussion now. Wolverhampton Wanderers, fantastic club, great tradition, a well-managed club. Their chief executive, Jez Moxey, is very highly regarded. They fired Mick McCarthy last weekend. Was that knee-jerk, Tony? They must have had a list. They don't seem to have had a list that's actually very operational.
You'd like to think they would have had a list because of the way and the dramatic way of sacking Mick just like that. I mean, the last game was live on Sky. He openly admitted it. That's not the type of performance he expected from one of his teams. They're always well run, well efficient, a good compact side. And I think it was definitely a knee-jerk because...
From your playing days and from your agent representation time now, how important is it that the manager has that squad? I mean, we've got a situation at Chelsea where we're being led to believe the manager doesn't have the squad and it's very fragmented. And we can talk about that in a minute. But from your days and your advice to your players, you always advise them to get behind the manager? Do you advise them to hold their position in the squad by holding what they believe is right? How do you advise your players when they're in a position like this?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, if you have a squad, you're a united bunch of players. Not everyone's going to be picked. Everybody knows that. But while you are at a club and you're being paid to play, I think it's very important that you get behind the manager. And I think because of the way football has changed now, that you have got massive egos. I'm not saying they want egos 10, 20, there'll always be egos, but they just seem to be they're earning so much money, and with the money comes the power and the ego. And I think that side of it has changed because suddenly now, if a player has something to say, he'll go home and tweet it, and then it becomes...
Yes, that's a new phenomenon. That wasn't around particularly in your time as chief executive of all
No,
those
no,
clubs you were chief
that's certainly a
executive
new
of.
one on me. Yeah.
Chelsea, it looks like a ship in distress. I don't want to jump on that ship particularly. I hope for the sake of the game that Roman keeps excited and keeps invigorated, and I hope the team does well, because it's an English team still, just about in Europe. The hiring of a manager, the firing of a manager, Peter, how do you weigh that up when the media is swirling around you?
I think what generally happens, or certainly in my experience, and I've been doing this job for 22 years up until recently, and generally something builds up. Generally you've had a run of things that give you concern, or you get some sort of feedback that things are not right. You watch the games, obviously, and if the results are not going well, you don't generally just make it on one game. It's after a period of time that goes on. I think Chelsea's a slightly different situation. I think you've got a situation there where everybody knew they've got a lot of players, that are coming towards the end of their career. Not yet. I don't think at their career they've got very, very good players still in lots been written about Frank Lampard and John Terry. There'd certainly be in any team I ever got involved in. I still think they're fantastic players, but they're getting towards their own. So there's probably a little bit of a basis of rebuilding at Chelsea, and I think all clubs have to have that.
Let's park Chelsea for a second. We have Wayne, who's that looks suspiciously like Roman Abramovich. We have Wayne. We thought you looked like the spitting image of Roman Abramovich. The picture of him and you came
I
up
wish
at the
I had
same
his money.
time.
If I did, then I don't think Wolves would be in the situation that they are at the moment.
Well, Wayne, tell us your thoughts at the moment. You're kind of in a limbo land.
My thoughts were that if Mick McCarthy were going to go, we should have sacked him maybe the beginning of January and given a new manager a month to get in the players that he wants. But obviously we sacked him 2 weeks ago. And then if this were the worst case scenario, we've got 2 weeks to get someone in. So last weekend should have been the deadline where we want to bring someone else in for me.
Tony Finnigan here is nodding his head while you're saying that. Tony, do you think
No,
Wayne's
I agree
right?
with him. January, it gives the new manager enough time to suddenly try and make an impact and do something and make a difference, because that's really what the supporters want. They want to know that the guy that comes in is going to be given a chance, because it's not going to be easy to pick up points.
Now it's a difficult one. He's got what he's got.
Yeah.
Wayne, feeling slightly embarrassed that nobody seems to want to come?
Yeah, that is because as you touched on there, Wolves have got a great history and a great heritage about them, and any manager really should want to come to a team like Wolves. I don't think they're a team that no one would want to come to. Steve Bruce, he's really just looking the only candidate now that we could possibly get. And let's be honest, we're clutching scores at Steve Bruce. A week ago, a Wolves fan wouldn't have wanted Steve Bruce. A lot of them probably didn't want even Alan Kirbishley, but now we're clutching at scores. We've got nobody. Even Walter Smith today has completely just rejected us. I can't understand why. We do need some answers to why. I don't know if it's because the board and who's coming in, they're just so far apart, or is it just the fact that we're offering a short-term contract and the managers don't.
Who would you like?
Tony's just asked a question. Who would you like? You said you didn't like Steve Bruce. Who would you like?
Well, let's be honest. There isn't anybody else apart from Steve Bruce. Is there at the moment? I would really like Alan Kirbishley. I think he'd be great for the team. But we do need someone. We can't just have Terry O'Connor like we've got for this weekend, who's worked under Mick McCarthy for the last 6 years. So the only tactics he's going to bring in are Mick McCarthy. So if we are going to do that, why not kept Mick McCarthy for the last 2 weeks? At least so the team's got a bit of stability there, haven't they?
Peter's been in a very similar situation in a couple of occasions. What's your thoughts about this at Wolves?
Well, I think obviously the transfer window is a relevant point.
It was integral,
and,
yeah.
integral to it. But sometimes these situations tend to build up on you, and you tend to think, well, let's get through the window and let him bring a couple of players in, and then if the results don't go for the next couple of games, sometimes these reactions happen, and you make these things.
I don't know your fixtures.
I think there's been, from the outside looking in, there appears to be a little bit of a personality clash happened here at Wolves, and it does seem significant that this has all happened after the so-called dressing room incident. No one knows the actual truth about that, only what we read in the papers.
Any thoughts about that, Wayne? Did the sentiment of the fans
I don't think he should have barged in on the. I don't think he should have barged in on him. I think he's got to leave that part to Mick McCarthy. Really, in my eyes, you just leave it to Mick.
I haven't seen the fixture list, Wayne. What have you got coming up?
we've got Fulham, we've got Fulham, Newcastle, and Blackburn the next 3 games. And to be honest, they're 3 winnable games. We might not win them all, but we could get 6 points there.
How do you think the lads are going to react to it all? Are they going to be fired up to just do what they've got to do on Saturday?
Yeah, I think they are, because a lot of them are taking the blame for Mick McCarthy's sacking. So hopefully they feel like they've got a point to make.
You've been in that type of dressing room, presumably, Tony. Is it a real do and die spirit?
Well, I think, to be honest, you'd want to see a reaction from the players. It's funny what you just touched on there, that Terry Connor was underneath Mick McCarthy for 6 years, but quite often he can imagine how Terry's feeling. He can't wait. This is his opportunity, a bit like Neil Redfern at Leeds. Yeah. You've got an opportunity, 1 or 2 games, to have an impact. If he can get those 6 points like he's just saying there, suddenly it makes Jezza be happy, because probably be cheaper. But
so if he did, if he did achieve that, say you got 6 points in the next couple of games, would you go, you know what, let's run with the chap?
Well, if we do get 6 points out of the next 3 games, all we've got left is 11 games, and 4 of those games against top teams. And after these run of 3 games that I've just touched on, we've got Manchester United then. So even though last season we did beat Man United, we beat Man City, we beat Chelsea, we beat them all last season, didn't we?
Yes, you do have a habit of doing that. Look, I have to say, again, I keep saying this because we've had people from clubs that I happen to be rather fond of, and I like Jez as well. So, again, I want to wish you lots of luck. Everyone's going to be looking out for you, and nobody wants you particularly to drop out of the Premier League.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that
I hope it runs for you.
Can say is that all football fans have got a soft spot for Wolves.
Thank you very much for your time. Peter, last word before we go to a commercial break.
I think Tony would say as well, I think the teams that's going to get out of it, and if Wolves are going to be one of them, it's going to be the teams that play with confidence. It's all about confidence done above that league.
It's a mindset, isn't it?
And sometimes when you change your manager, even if it's a temporary manager, or even if it's the assistant manager takes over, suddenly the team looks a different team. You can't explain why, but a lot of it is because
that's funny, that
there's suddenly a different feel.
Just a different atmosphere.
If Terry takes the stance and drops a few players that actually turn up on the everyday knowing that they're going to play at the weekend, if he suddenly makes an example, which he's got a chance to do,
it's a watch
then
this
suddenly
space.
It's like, we've got to do it.
Watch this space. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you for your comments. It's really an interesting position that Wolves find themselves in the next 4 or 5 days even. We're going to go to a commercial break for one last time. Thank you for staying with us. Please don't go away, because we really will miss you and we want you back. Hello and welcome back to the agency. We've had some interesting discussions the last 45 or so minutes. Watch this last bit. I've got a couple of interesting topics to discuss with Peter and with Tony. Stay with us. I want to have a conversation about something the Prime Minister brought up yesterday, which is racism in football. You made a really interesting comment before the programme when we were discussing this, and I was trying to be respectful by saying, how do you feel about the black community? And you said to me, it's the community. There's no black community. It's black, white, whatever, which is exactly how I feel. And I'm delighted to hear you take that position, because that's immensely supportive of life in general. But we have some situations currently in the game. I personally haven't seen a lot of racism in football, apart from years ago on the terraces, which was awful. Have you had any experiences of racism? Have you experienced racism in your time in our game in football?
Yeah, 100%. When I played, I was playing in 1985, so obviously the world was a different place and England was a different place. That's when I made my debut, and it was a different time. But you were aware of it. I was born here, I was brought up here. I know, you know the demographics here. So it's, the answer is yes.
You must feel awful. I mean, it must be. I mean, I've known John Barnes, for instance, for many years, and they're throwing bananas at him.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is ridiculous. I mean, you must have, when you ran off a football field, and people had made noises at you. Yeah. How did you feel?
To be honest, John, people
sad, angry.
I wasn't. I know it sounds really, really crazy. I remember sitting with the guy who kick it out. I can't remember his name. He was the one in charge of it. The tall Asian guy, and he said to me, I don't like what you do. I'll never forget this. And I said to him, well, what do I do? I was as an 8-year-old, I dreamt of being a footballer, and I managed to do it. And during those times of growing up, I don't remember any Asian players. not because they weren't playing, but it was different. Maybe your culture wasn't embracing the sport itself. So when I hear players today in 2012 talking about, you know, he abused me, if I'm honest, John, the most profound time for me growing up was with Jim Cannon, George Wood at Crystal Palace under Coppell's reign. And at that time it was the era of Ian Wright, Andy Gray, myself, John Solarco coming up underneath. I remember we fielded a team with Henry Houghton, who was there at the time. We had 5 forwards, and that's the first ever time I ever looked at it as colour, when I thought, hang on, there's 5 black players here on the front.
So now, fast forward, 2012, Suarez, the incident, again, how does that make you feel?
I was angry at that for 2 points. And the first point being, for Evra to, I'm not saying he shouldn't react, but when he reacted the way he did, I didn't see any other Man United players at that time, in that sequence of play, react like he did. Whether they were black or not, no one turned around and went, how dare you talk to my teammate like that? It was just him and Suarez. And then my reaction to Suarez is, I'm angry without a shadow of a doubt.
Of course. Look, no excuse for Suarez saying what he said.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a more lax culture, though, in some European countries towards racism, or what we term as racism, coloured issues?
Well, the point I was going to make there, John, was Suarez is a Hispanic coming from South America. I'm not saying there aren't blacks in South America, I'm sure there are, obviously. It's the fact that when these guys come across here, they don't have any regard for the club they're playing for, our league. It's just they come across, these joint a massive club, one of the world's biggest clubs, and he's just doing whatever he wants. So if he's on the pitch and feels like saying that name to a black player, then it's like, well, I'll say it. But in my time, I'll be very straight.
It is offensive, and he should know better, shouldn't he?
Yeah, but he would have got hurt without a shadow of a doubt, because not just because I would have been black, but one of my teammates would have done it because it was wrong.
Right. Okay, Peter, should the FA be encouraged to work with inbound players to educate them in our ways, or is that just a step too far?
I think it's a step too far for the FA. I think the clubs could help.
Liverpool, let's take Liverpool for a second.
Yeah, the clubs could help.
Liverpool didn't help that situation, did they?
Most Premiership clubs, for example, have player liaison people that work, all the time with the players, and they could certainly help them and educate them to it. But the reality is, there's never time, and players come in training, they come in and they train and they go. So
revisit Liverpool for a second. I thought that their handling of it was abjectly appalling at the beginning. I mean, they've obviously said what they've said subsequently, but it did seem to be, we're not really bothered about this issue.
I think, unfortunately, hindsight is a wonderful word, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll be looking at that and regretting it. But what I find about this is that it seems such a shame to me that this has happened a little bit in the last year, because we seem to have gone through a very, very quiet period where this has seemed to have gone out of the game.
Yeah, that's what I said to you, Tony, as well.
Peter, really, you don't go to stadiums now, John, and think, when you go to stadiums now, you'll have mixed crowds.
Which is great.
This is what it's all about. You can go to a stadium and see people from all over the place.
And I think, Tony, this is why this has been such a shock. I think because the kick racism amount has worked, and we should be talking about football players. We shouldn't be talking about white or black or whatever
that's the point that
the word
Tony
may
made.
be. It's about football players.
But what are they kicking out? This is my point. That's the point I was trying to make. We've got the Kick It Out campaign. Well, before you had the Kick It Out campaign, 99.9% of our population wouldn't want to hear that abusive language anyway. You don't need someone to say, right, let me find this sport, which is a global sport.
It's like highlighting something that may not actually be there. I remember when we had, years ago, there was like the family enclosure for football grounds, and that said to me, well, that bit's okay, but the rest of it's all kind of, be careful. Can I just move this on a second?
Yeah.
John Terry, I want to ask you a question. Should he be at Euro 2012?
If he's fit and in form, and the manager, whoever that England manager is, picks him, he should go. Why not?
Because innocent until proven guilty?
Well, innocent until...
just...
Well, the thing is, obviously, if you are innocent until proven guilty, but again, why should it all be? I'm not accusing John of doing anything. Time will tell what happens, but I'm talking about the football itself and the individual you're talking about. He's the captain of our country. He said something, or allegedly said something, and now we're talking about, well, he shouldn't go to 2012. And I read loads of articles. I'm probably going to get stick from some teammates or ex-mates or friends or whatever. But for me, if he's fit and playing, in form, and he's picked, he should go.
Should they take the captaincy away from him then?
Not the way they did. No chance.
So that was the manager's decision. If you were Capello, what would
well,
you
I
have done?
don't. It seemed to me like Capello wasn't the one who did it.
No,
you know,
Capello,
it was the FA that decided.
Capello didn't want him to go.
You know, the FA. Again, John, it's such a fickle subject. I think the manager should be the brunt of everything. It should have been Capello's job to quietly do it and say, right, I'm going to change the captaincy. But it's such a farce. I hate to say it, but the way the FA have handled things regarding whether it be John or Rio, and you know, you've got to understand this England camp. You've got the divide. You've got a Chelsea camp, Man United camp. You've got a Liverpool camp.
And you've got to cohabit. You've got to
try and all be friends. And
right.
it's
How do you engineer that? You've been at the top of a number of football clubs. How do you engineer that happy camp, which because it's in human life and encased in emotion in football, is always going to have issues. How do you engineer that?
It's not easy, John. It's not an easy situation. I mean, in this instance, I mean, everybody is prejudging this. No one knows the facts other than the police that have done the investigation. And having personally gone through 4 years of hell,
yeah,
I actually,
Peter, can I just come off this subject for a second, because I was going to bring this, and we haven't got very much longer. So I'm actually going to. I'm delighted that both of you share the obvious views, and I knew you did. But it's you know, I personally don't think there's a lot of racism in football. It's an issue which I think is
I think
actually
these are two isolated incidents.
I agree. And I'm delighted that you say that. I want to talk to you, Peter, in the very short time we've got left. You were one of the only people that was found unanimously innocent on a charge. Give us very briefly what happened, because I know it's all linked up with the Harry Redknapp case as well.
Well, I was charged, was arrested 4 years ago, so I had this for 4 years of my life. Ended up 12 weeks in Southwark Court, because the first case was had to be stopped because the judge got ill, you know, which is unbelievable.
4 years of your life?
So 4 years of my life. 12 weeks in Southwark Crown Court. Was found unanimously not guilty in less than 2.5 hours from a jury, which shows exactly what they thought of the whole case, and then had the unbelievable position of being found innocent and having to wait 3.5 months to actually tell the world, because there was a case involving Milan.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that there is a safe haven in British justice. Sometimes I find that a little disturbing.
Dear.
I just wanted to bring a little bit of humour in at the end, Peter. I know you as a very, very good football administrator, and I hope very ardently hope that you'll be back running football clubs again in any time now. In the next few weeks and months, the game will be better for your future involvement. In the meanwhile, have a look back. Can you tell us what on earth's going on there?
This was in days at West Ham. We set up schools of football in Australia. We had one in Perth, one in Melbourne. This one is a Blacktown city in Sydney, which we had. I used to go over there literally every 6 to 8 weeks.
Tony.
I know, and I used to get involved out there and show them the coaching methods that we were using in the UK.
Not that you need a CV, it's just another part of it.
It's another part.
Gentlemen, you have been tremendously entertaining and interesting. I know the viewers would have learnt a lot, and they would, I hope, go away with another smile about more people in football who are involved in football who actually care about it. So thank you very much for your involvement. We look forward to having you back sometime again in the near future.
Pleasure.
To all of you who are out there watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. There's a lot more to come in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good evening. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.